Hello and welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Football Forecast. We're recording live together today from
Beautiful Southern California.
yeah, excellent. And yeah, so we're very excited to get into this episode. And when we were together, we decided to go over what is Superflex and what makes it fun and why it's fun. So
Yeah, so Superflex from a very high level is essentially a 2 QB. So you're getting that extra flex spot with the option to use that person as a quarterback. And one thing that we've found a lot of fun with our home league is, since transitioning to this format, it's made, both draft day more fun, watching the games more fun, and things like that. So we really want to kind of break down some of the strategy behind Superflex and kind of why we think it's kind of the format of the future. Correct?
yeah, and I really enjoy Superflex. The first league I ever played in, actually, 15 years ago, was a Superflex league, and it was 12-team Superflex. So there's a little bit different strategies between 10 and 10 and 12-team leagues. But overall, Superflex is so much more enjoyable, I think, because the quarterback is the most important position in real life football. So
It's the most important position in all sports.
yeah, I mean, it actually is though. Like
Yeah.
with how much goes into the preparation and facilitating, getting the ball to the playmakers, it's such an important position. And only knowing, the top 10 maybe or the top 12, or having that be the only pool of quarterbacks that's relevant in fantasy, making it go all the way down to 25 or even 30 is such a better way to play. And also, it kind of takes on another role in fantasy of making that position relevant in the drafts, because a lot of times it's just a lot of quarterbacks. A lot of running backs, a lot of receivers. Maybe get your tight end in there somewhere. Pick a quarterback at the end of the draft. You hear analysts say it all the time, like just wait. Just wait. If you get QB8, you get QB10. You could even go all the way down and just wait till last round of your draft to pick a quarterback. And that's not how it should be. And in Superflex, you get quarterbacks, multiple quarterbacks in the first round. You're getting quarterbacks all the way throughout your draft. Everybody's trying to get three usually. Sometimes you get two really good ones. You don't get a third. You can deal with that on the waiver wire if it comes. But yeah, it's just a much more enjoyable way to play. And explaining it from just a roster construction perspective, there are multiple ways you can do it. You can remove your flex spot and add a super flex spot. Or you could just add a super flex spot to your starting lineup, which is what I recommend. So if you have two running back, two receiver, tight end flex, if you add a super flex to your starting lineup, you'll obviously have higher average totals when you do that. But it adds an element to your starting lineup of obviously more points, but it's just additional players that you're following, which I think is really enjoyable.
Yeah, and that's kind of the fun aspect of it too. Like, to give you an example from last year specifically in the Superflex League, guys like CJ Stroud were getting drafted, obviously later in the draft, but to hit on someone like that late when maybe you took a Josh Allen early or whomever that might have been, just makes the analysis that goes into when you're prepping for your draft that much more important. So, there's obviously a lot of hype with, some rookies coming into the league, but in a 10-team, 1 QB league, it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to take CJ Stroud. I'm going to take Trevor Lawrence in, the 10th round or something ridiculous. So hitting on those guys and kind of talking trash to your buddies and things like that. And, not to mention too, when the game's coming down to the wire and, maybe you've got Josh Allen as your number one, and, maybe your number two is on bye and you got to start Will Levis or something like that, and you're kind of sweating it out going into Sunday night. It's just so much more fun, and you're following these guys, week to week. You're following them during mini camp, training camp, things like that, because you really have to construct your roster in a way that centers around these QBs. So we actually did a breakdown video of a bunch of different mock drafts where we did different strategies involving Superflex. You can go, some people go QB, some people decide to wait and hit on guys late. But if we've talked about in the Cleveland episode specifically, and right now Deshaun Watson, for example, is QB, I want to say 18 on the season via Fantasy Pros, and if he's someone that you think is going to be a bounce back candidate, then go ahead and take him as your second QB, maybe in like the 7th or 8th round. But if that doesn't hit, then you're probably going to be kicking yourself. So there's this whole other element that adds to both that as well as the waiver wire. Like last year, Will Levis stepped in. He threw 4 touchdowns. I think it was like 3 to D Hop, right?
Yeah, it was 3D Hop and
Yeah.
300 yards. Yeah.
And he was just, I think someone spent like a quarter of their fab budget on him. Obviously, that didn't really play out throughout the year, but as quarterbacks get thin in this type of format, there's just so much more strategy involved. So some teams leave the draft with 2 QBs. I know in the past Steve left our draft with 4 QBs.
Yeah.
There's just a whole other element that you have to consider that we think is really fun inside it.
Yeah. Another thing I like about Superflex versus 2 quarterback as well, because some of you might be asking the question, why not just do 2 quarterbacks if you're going to be having a second quarterback in the lineup? And Superflex is good because as you get towards bye weeks, if you only choose to roster 2 quarterbacks, you don't end up in a situation with a bye week where your guys have the same bye week and you don't have anybody to play, or you end up with one guy on bye and you're only carrying 2 quarterbacks. You have a really good, like you hit on receivers and running backs late. You don't have anybody that you want to cut for, say, like an Aiden O'Connell. Like nobody wants to do that. So you can just in those weeks play a receiver or a running back in your super flex spot,
right?
To get by, and that's obviously gonna knock down your projection and stuff. But like when you're looking at the full scope of your season and you want to keep the guys that you have that you like on your bench, you're able to just plug in one of those guys into a super flex spot versus a second quarterback.
Yeah,
spot.
you're not going to have to end up cutting someone that you don't want to cut just to pick up a really crappy quarterback. Like you're not going to have to play Zach Wilson looking at last year when you've got, Gus Bus or something that you might have hit on late, or
Zach Wilson just perennially on the waiver wire. It's the QB 32.
Yeah, I hope we don't have to say his name much this season.
We'll see with Bo Nix. Hopefully Bo Nix takes that role and goes. But see, and these are the kind of guys that in regular leagues you would never even consider talking about. But these are guys that are going to be end of draft decisions when you're in the 13th, 14th round. Like, do I want to continue to attack receiver, and running back, trying to hit on somebody maybe late, maybe somebody from the Denver backfield even type of thing, or do you want to lock in a 4th quarterback or a 3rd quarterback, right? And you take shots on maybe the rookies that are down there, like Bo Nix, right? I mean, going into last year, CJ Stroud wasn't going to be fantasy relevant. I'm not suggesting Bo Nix is CJ Stroud. I'm just saying, in terms of roster construction and QB rank, they're probably going to be relatively similar positions. And so, just checking in on quarterback, and after they take the field in week 1, quarterback, you generally can have an idea of if they're going to be good or not. Like, I think even after week 1 last year, it was pretty clear that Stroud was going to be better than Bryce Young, despite the fact that it was drafted in fantasy the other way. But, if you have these rookies that you like, or these early career quarterbacks that you like Sam Howell last year, he was a popular sleeper that obviously wasn't relevant in one quarterback, but that, kind of snuck up into the back end of the top 20 towards the end of drafts last year. And he was awesome for, a good part of the year. Obviously he ended up getting benched and replaced, but he was very serviceable as a fantasy quarterback there for a good part of the year.
Yeah. And then just kind of adding another layer on top of that in terms of not just the guys that you want to hit on late, but when you're in a 1 QB league, someone like Justin Herbert might not even get drafted. And we know his talent profile. We know what he can do with the ball in his hands. We know just how dominant he can be on the field. And, to me, that's just not necessarily fun. I know the Chargers are going to try to run more, but he's going to throw touchdowns. It's going to be an efficient offense. Like, I don't know. To me, there's just so much more excitement that comes in with this format. And, we hope, and it is growing in popularity too, which, for good reason.
Yeah. And so, again, to reiterate, the reason that we're trying to bring content like this to YouTube and to more people is that there just isn't a lot of analysis that breaks down Superflex overall strategy, right? You have QB ranks and stuff, but I always lament the fact that the quarterback ranks that you will go and read online don't account for 2 quarterbacks. They account for 1 quarterback, and then you start seeing guys get pushed up into the 15 range that have like upside, or that could turn into QB1s, but they don't really account for the downside, because in 1 quarterback, if you take a 15th overall quarterback, you can just cut that guy because it's end of roster type of guy. In Superflex, if you're taking the 15th quarterback in 8th round as a starter and they flame out, you're in a really bad spot. You have to be able to draft guys that are going to continue to start for their teams and that are going to be relatively consistent, even if that ceiling isn't as high. So, like a lot of the ranking sets, even that you go through and you read for quarterbacks, just don't fit the super flex mold
Yeah,
very
and
well.
even on top of that, when you do find Superflex rankings, be very wary of those because those are designed for two wide receiver, 12 team leagues. So you'll see this laundry list of quarterbacks before even guys like Tyreek Hill are going. So we can't instill enough, know the format of your specific league because that'll change how you draft immensely. So to give you an example, in our home league, we play a 10 team three wide receiver super flex league. So while quarterbacks are still pushed up, having that third receiver makes guys, all that more valuable to get that true number one. So we expect to see in our league this year, maybe two, maybe three quarterbacks in the first round, but make sure you understand the way that your league works, or else you're going to be very behind the eight ball if you could have gotten somebody, like a number 7 QB with Tyreek and, someone else too. So
Yeah. And we see that a lot, right? That in super flex leagues, some guys just rush to get quarterbacks, but in 10 teams, especially that when you talk about average value, right? In 10 teams, especially when like the last starter is going to be QB 20, there are still quarterbacks down in that range, like Rodgers or Deshaun Watson or Kirk Cousins, that can be very productive. So the drop off in starter value isn't nearly as much as it is in 12 team superflex leagues when there's more picks up front early, but then that drop off in terms of starting player goes down to Will Levis and Derek Carr and even like I mentioned Bo Nix, but he's going like 27th, which is like right at the cusp of that
yeah
that turnover. So again, like Matt said, knowing your league setup, making sure that based on 10 versus 12, that you don't reach a little bit too much early at quarterback. In my opinion, on 10 teams is going quarterback can put you behind the eight ball at the other positions quite a bit. When you can get value, say in the 5th or the 6th round at your second quarterback. So
yeah, and check out our video where Trevor breaks down a bunch of different mock drafts specific to that format. And we can't drill this in enough, like mock draft, figure out what you like, figure out what works, because you don't want to be caught on draft day with your tail between your legs. If everyone goes quarterback and you're SOL, then you can't win a championship like that. So going back to the overall research and draft strategy, it just makes it that much more enjoyable.
And we'll continue to do those mock draft breakdowns. I think that video ended up being really informative. So we'll continue to do that. We'll continue to do live mock drafts, and we'll break down some of these guys that we think should be in similar tiers and how we rank them and why we would push certain guys ahead of others. So, this range of quarterbacks that we're talking about, we'll do a video of like the rookies, like Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and like against like a Kirk Cousins type of decision, right? And you're looking in a super flex league versus a one quarterback. The two rookies are going to get pushed way up, but Cousins is somebody that we know can produce and we know is going to start. And so, down as you get later, some of the guys might have some question marks, but we'll break down some of those videos for you guys in the coming days with the lower end quarterbacks.
Cool, man. Anything else to add on top?
No, we're good, and we'll keep pushing on this Superflex. Obviously, that's the goal of the channel, and so hopefully we'll convince some of you guys that are watching to come along for the Superflex ride with us.
Thanks, guys.